So this is a classic example of why you shouldn't really assume that a margin is consistent all the way along. Just because you've made a few casts and you think you found a gravel slope, for example, don't think that it's a gravel slope all the way along, because here for a number of meters it's really quite different. At this point here we've got a massive hole and we've got an aggressive gravel slope, few rocks here, and if I walk forward into this hole, this might not seem like much, but this is a good 20 centimeters deeper than the surrounding area. And finding a hole like this, perfect spot for a rig for sure. So I don't actually recognise this feature at all. It's not one that I've found before. So for me, this is a brand new carp feeding hole, which is a great discovery. And just behind me here, we've got a bank of silt before it goes back down into this nice hard clean gravel margin. So we've got gravel margin, big carpy hole, silt bank, and then back to gravel margin. Location, 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 especially on an old silty estate lake. Rig positioning is absolutely critical. So I've had a little bit of a pad around here, and I'm pretty much, for me, I'm in the lowest point of the hole. I'm in the middle of the hole here. Now, if I take 1 meter that way, that is definitely softer. Another meter, way, and I'm in the muck, and I nearly got a boot full. And 2 meters on a cast, when you're fishing a far margin, even at close range, what 2 meters actually is in distance, you can't see that on a cast. You really can't, because it's very difficult to judge distance when you're casting. Left and right, easy. Distance, really hard. Quite a shallow slope this bit, nice hard crunchy gravel. It's a little bit softer here, and then we're in a big carpy silt hole, and there's a big difference between the height. Yeah, that's 30 centimeters differential in about a meter, so it changes really quickly. This is why learning to fish with a light lead is important. It's nonsense that you need a 3 or 4 ounce lead in every situation to catch carp, because you absolutely don't. I only use the size of lead I need to do for the distance that I'm fishing, and if I need a 1.5 ounce lead, then I will use a 1.5 ounce lead. Don't need anything bigger. Right, let's do a fly through underneath the fir tree here and show you what a gnarly rocky place that is. That's the big carp cave, and then we've got a rooty hole and a lovely kind of excavated polished patch there. So every 2 years we visit this hole and we cut off the roots that they've excavated and we leave it all nice and clean, and within 2 years they've excavated another 15 or 20 centimeters and exposed a load more roots. And this is not, this is not small, these roots. The carp are feeding in this hole, but you don't want to try and present a rig in this, because the chance of actually landing a carp is pretty slim, to be honest. So I found another carp hole here, just in front of this big boulder. It's a good area to fish, but you've got to get your rig location absolutely spot on, because if you drop a rig, up here behind that rock, because you don't know where that rock is, because maybe you just driven your bait boat out and guessed, oh, that'll do, it's near to the island, that'll be all right. You get a take on that, then your main line's going around here, even if you've got tubing, that is going to cut you off. It's going to be a very short experience. That's what makes this venue, an interesting challenge for anglers. It doesn't matter how many years you've been fishing, how much experience you've got, there are nasty little surprises that are going to bring you back down to earth. For me, the best area to target when I'm looking for a feature of, trying to decide where to place a rig is something like this, actually. It's just fine grit, not hardly any stones, and wherever you've got fine grit, it means that the carp have polished it. 1/2 meter away from this strip, my feet are in a few centimeters of silt. Then you've got this gritty zone for about 1/2 meter, and then beyond that we've got a little rocky slope. So given the choice between, do I present it on the rocky slope, do I present it in the shingle, if you like, or do I present it in the muck, well, I'd always go for this shingle. So I've just come round to the next bay on the back of the island and I found this rock. The carp have cleaned a zone, well, total diameter probably about 2 meters wide, and there's a bit more space in front of it than behind it. This is basically a rock sitting in a large gravel hole, and this is just a feature that has been made by the carp. During the summer months, this is actually one of my feeding spots. So I come out in the boat, I have a tamp around, I find this rock and I empty a load of 7mm cereal pellet all over this area. And I do this to feed the fish. I do this here because I know that this was already a feeding hole. This is not a feature that I've created. This is a spot that they're already happy to feed in. In terms of fishing this spot, anywhere within this 2 meter circle will do. Obviously you don't want to drop a rig behind this rock, otherwise you might get cut off by it. But yeah, we've got a few stones, but they're really not very big. Obviously if you get a hook stuck on one of these, it's absolutely game over, hooks in the bin. Very difficult to get a rig back from this situation if it doesn't do a bite, but if you can get a rig accurately out into this zone, you stand a very, very good chance of doing a bite. Now this is a large area, but if you think you can stand on a bank even 30 meters away, cast a rig, miss the trees and actually get it somewhere in this zone, I think you're kidding yourself. I wouldn't attempt this cast. Bait boat it over, bushwhacker it over, rowing boat it over, much more accurate ways of doing this. Making a cast and getting a rig to land within a 2 meter circle, even at 30 yards, is actually far harder than you think it is. If you want to see how hard it is, go to a field, mark out a circle and see if you can drop one in it, see how good you really are. But when you throw vagaries into the situation like wind and trees and other hazards, then it's actually a lot harder. Personally, I think it's much better to take the time and trouble to get the rig into position safely and accurately, however that may be. You can hop in the water, wade around this margin, drop it in and walk the line back. At least you know that the rig is going to be accurately dropped and you're going to be fishing. So when I'm walking on this clay, it's really sticky. There's no depth there, but it's trying to suck my boot off. When I go into this area over here, the silt gets dispersed, but I'm still left with this sensation of a sticky layer. So if you feature finding in a lake and you feel something that's really quite firm, but it's a little bit sticky like that and really quite kind of greasy, then that's a clay area. If you're using a leading rod or a marker rod and you're pulling a lead through an area and it starts to race, it starts to slide, it feels like you're almost kind of skating it along glass, then that's clay. Right, well, I've just spotted a new carp hole here and there's 25 centimetres difference between the bottom of this hole and the surrounding area. So I'm stood in this hole here and I was just wondering, well, what have the carp been so interested in that they've excavated this hole in this area? And you can see quite clearly it's absolutely covered in these tiny little breather holes, and I suspect that that's bloodworm breather holes. And this is carp food, this is what carp eat, and the carp will go to a lot of trouble to excavate these, and it's just obviously a rich concentration of bloodworm. That's the bottom of the hole there, the top of the hole is up there, and that just goes clunk straight in the muck there. Whereas here, just a few centimetres deep. So they've cleaned and excavated. It's not a big hole, not easy to find at all, my word. So it's about that by that. Rich source of food, great to see. Oh, here we go. So that red thing is a little bloodworm. That is why carp will go to a lot of time and trouble to dig through really hard substrate. And this is why the carp in this lake, the mouths are super hard, because this stuff is brutal to dig through. I mean, I'm using a little fork here, but you can imagine how hard a carp's mouth gets if he's rooting through this stuff just to just to feed. So underneath the stones you got the leaf matter breaking down and forming this kind of organic mix, and that's habitat for bloodworm. And this is why we see these holes that weren't there just appear, really. And this is why the hole further along there just kind of gets excavated and cleaned out, and the roots keep on getting exposed, because that's where the natural food is. And the carp will dig and dig and dig, and the hole gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And while there is food there, the hole will always be clean. It will always be a concentration of activity for the carp. So finding these holes, if you can find one and drop a rig there, then yeah, the carp are going to come to you rather than you having to go and find the carp. So we've got a big bowl that's been excavated here, and the bowl turns into a ditch that is going along that way parallel to the margin. We've got another carp hole over there. It's concentrations of food which change the carp's activity. So I just come across to a soft silty spot which is just a few metres away from where we were, and I just wanted to have a little kind of dig in this to see what I could find. I found some bloodworm very quickly on the gravel slope. That's where they were happy, because there was the stones to hide behind and stuff. I'm digging in this muck and there's nothing, no life. And this is why the carp haven't been feeding here, because there's just nothing of interest for them. For me, what all this means is just how important proper feature finding is, no matter how you do it, and why feeling the donk for me is a fundamental part of carp fishing. If you don't know what the lead is landing on, then you have no idea what you are fishing on. And if every time you make a cast, if you feel that lead down and you get a sensation, you get feedback as to what you've landed on, it just builds the picture. If you're getting pickups when you're getting a real kind of crackdown on rock hard ground, that's information. If you're feeling a soft thud and you're still catching, then that's information. It's impossible to say, customers ask me all the time, so do I want to target the hard, or do I want to target the soft, or do I want to target the bits in between? The answer is, I don't know, mate. You've got to pick some spots, know what you're fishing over, and see what is going to work. Change the depths, change your location, change the distance to the margin, change your angles, change the firmness of the spot that you're fishing over. And as the week goes on, then whether you're blanking or whether you're catching, you should be learning, you should be building the picture, and that enables you to make better decisions. Some weeks you'll only get a pickup on the soft stuff, some weeks you'll only get a pickup on the hard stuff, and that's just the way it is. If it's fishing really well, it doesn't matter really where you're fishing, as long as your rigs are good enough, you're going to get pickups consistently. But if you don't know what you're fishing over, then you're pub chucking, you're fishing blind. I've been fishing this water for 14 years. Do I fully understand it? No. Am I still learning the water? Yeah. The game keeps on changing. And that is why I love this sport. You never complete fishing.